I am sitting in my apartment right now alone, and honestly, I would not have it any other way. 6 months ago, I was planning a wedding with someone I thought was the love of my life. Her name was Jessica, and we had been together for 3 years. Everything seemed perfect. I had a stable job as a software engineer, she was pursuing her passion as a freelance graphic designer, and we were planning this small, intimate wedding for the following spring. But there was always one person who seemed to be around more than I was comfortable with. Derek, her best friend from college. He had just moved back to Portland after losing his job in Seattle, and Jessica was thrilled to have him nearby. I trusted her completely, so I pushed my discomfort aside. That was my first mistake, because when Derek called me a toxic boyfriend, Jessica believed him without question. She packed her bags and moved out in a single night, leaving me confused, heartbroken, and wondering what I did wrong. Before I tell you how this story took the most unexpected turn, I want to know where you were watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever been called the bad guy in a relationship, when you were just trying to set healthy boundaries, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear how this whole situation flipped upside down in the most satisfying way possible. Because 2 weeks after Jessica moved in with Derek, he was the one desperately calling me, begging me to take her back. And trust me, you will not believe what she did to him. Let me take you back to how Jessica and I met. It was 3 years ago at this little coffee shop in downtown Portland. I was grabbing my usual morning coffee before heading to work when I saw her sketching in a notebook at a corner table. She had this energy about her, this creative spark that just drew me in. We started talking, and I found out she was a freelance graphic designer trying to build her portfolio. I was immediately attracted to her spontaneity, her passion for art, and that charming smile that seemed to light up the entire room. Our chemistry was instant and natural. We started dating, and for the first year, everything felt easy. She was creative and fun, always suggesting spontaneous weekend trips to the Oregon coast or last-minute concerts downtown. I loved that about her because my life had always been structured and predictable. She brought excitement into my routine. After about a year of dating, we decided to move in together. I was renting a 2-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District for $2,100 a month. It was a nice place close to my office and had enough space for both of us. From the beginning, we had an understanding about finances. Jessica's income from freelance work was inconsistent. Some months she would land a great client and make decent money, but other months she would go weeks without any projects. I made a stable salary at my tech company, so I offered to cover the rent and utilities. She agreed to handle groceries and some of the smaller bills when she had money coming in. I did not mind this arrangement at all. I loved her, and I wanted to support her while she pursued her passion. It felt like what you do for someone you care about. After 2 years together, I knew I wanted to marry her. I planned this romantic proposal at Cannon Beach during sunset. It was perfect. She said yes, immediately tears in her eyes, talking about how excited she was to build a future together. We started planning a small wedding for the following spring, just close friends and family. Everything seemed to be falling into place exactly how I had always imagined it would. Those morning coffees before I left for work, our weekend trips to hike at Columbia River Gorge, cooking dinner together, on the nights when she was in the mood to help. I was genuinely happy. I thought I had found the person I would spend the rest of my life with. Then Derek came into the picture. Jessica had mentioned him before, always referring to him as her best friend from college. They had stayed in touch over the years, through social media and occasional video calls. When he told her he was moving back to Portland after losing his job in Seattle, she was thrilled. She kept saying things like, "You will love him, he is like a brother to me." I was completely open-minded about it. I wanted to support her friendships, and I had no reason to feel threatened. That was my second mistake. Our first meeting with Derek happened at a brewery downtown. He was in his late 20s, charismatic, and had this easygoing personality that made him instantly likable. He was renting a studio apartment in a trendy neighborhood, but I later found out his parents were helping him with the rent since he was unemployed. He kept saying he was taking time to find the right opportunity, which seemed reasonable at the time. He was friendly toward me during that first meeting, asking about my job and making jokes. But there was something underneath it all, a subtle competitiveness that I could not quite put my finger on. The red flags started slowly. Derek began stopping by our apartment randomly when I was at work. Jessica would say he was just in the neighborhood and decided to drop by. At first it was once a week, then twice, then 3 times. I would come home from the office and find Derek sitting on my couch with Jessica watching movies or eating the snacks I had bought during my grocery runs. He never once offered to chip in for anything, but I did not want to seem petty by bringing it up. I figured he was going through a tough time financially and I could afford to be generous. But then Jessica started changing. She began making little comments comparing me to other guys. Derek says modern men should split everything 50-50. Derek thinks you are too focused on money. I was confused by these statements because I was literally paying for the majority of our bills. How was that being focused on money? I was doing the opposite. I was being generous and supportive. But every time I tried to explain this, she would get defensive. The real trouble started with what I now call the controlling accusation. I had asked Jessica about her schedule one weekend because I was trying to plan a trip for us. I needed to coordinate time off work and book a place to stay. It was a simple question about availability, but she became immediately defensive, asking why I needed to know where she was all the time. Derek was there when this conversation happened, and he chimed in with, "Yeah, man, that is kinda controlling." I was taken completely off guard. I tried to explain that I just wanted to plan a trip for us, something romantic to get away for a few days. But Jessica doubled down, saying, I always needed to have everything my way. That moment stuck with me because it felt so unfair and so wrong. Then came the financial tension. Jessica had not had any freelance projects for 2 months straight. Bills were piling up, and I was covering absolutely everything. I gently brought up the conversation one evening, asking if we could talk about our finances. I suggested maybe she could look for a part-time job, just something temporary to help with expenses, while she continued searching for design clients. She was immediately offended, asking if I thought her work was not real work. Before I could even respond, Derek, who was once again at our apartment, jumped in with his opinion. He should not be putting financial pressure on you. That is financial abuse. I remember sitting there in complete shock. Since when did asking your partner to contribute to shared expenses become abuse? It was such a serious accusation, and it was being thrown around so casually. Things spiraled quickly after that. Jessica became increasingly distant. She was spending more and more time with Derek, sometimes not coming home until midnight or later. When I expressed concern about this, not out of jealousy, but out of genuine worry for our relationship, I was called jealous and insecure. Derek was always there to validate her feelings, telling her she deserved someone who trusted her. The dynamic had completely shifted. I went from being her loving partner to being painted as some kind of villain, and I could not understand how it had happened so fast. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. Jessica came home with Derek following behind her. They both sat me down at my own kitchen table and said we needed to talk. Derek led the entire conversation, which should have been my first clue about how orchestrated this was. He listed out all of my supposedly toxic behaviors. Asking about Jessica's whereabouts was controlling. Expecting financial contribution was financial abuse. Being uncomfortable with his constant presence was jealousy and insecurity. Having opinions about household decisions was being domineering. Expressing that I felt taken advantage of financially was making Jessica feel guilty about spending. Each accusation felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to defend myself. I tried to explain that boundaries are not the same as control, that shared expenses in a relationship are completely normal, that feeling uncomfortable with another man spending more time with my fiancée than I did was not unreasonable. But Derek cut me off every single time, telling me I was gaslighting her. I did not even know how to respond to that. Then Jessica delivered the ultimatum. She said she needed space to think and that she was going to stay with Derek for a while. I asked if we could talk about this privately, just the two of us without Derek in the room. Her response was immediate and cutting. See, you were trying to isolate me from my support system. Derek looked almost smug as he added, she needs to be around people who actually care about her. That one hurt more than anything else they had said. Jessica packed her bags that night, while I watched completely heartbroken and not knowing what to say. Anything I said would just be used as more evidence of my supposed toxicity. She took her clothes, her art supplies, and even the engagement ring, though she was not wearing it anymore. Derek helped her carry boxes to his car, barely making eye contact with me. When the door finally closed behind them, I stood in the middle of my apartment, which suddenly felt enormous and empty. The silence was deafening. The aftermath was brutal. I walked through the apartment that first night, seeing all the spaces where Jessica used to be. Her closet was empty except for a few hangers. The bathroom cabinet only had my toiletries now. Her art supplies that used to clutter the second bedroom were gone. The apartment felt hollow, and my footsteps seemed to echo off the walls in a way they never had before. I tried calling her the next morning, straight to voicemail. I sent a text asking if we could please just talk. I saw the red receipt turn on, meaning she had seen my message, but no response came. I tried again the following day with the same result. By the third day, I realized I had been blocked. I checked Instagram and found I was blocked there too. Facebook, same thing. She had completely cut me out of her life, as if our 3 years together meant absolutely nothing. The self-doubt started creeping in during those first few days. I found myself lying awake at 3 in the morning, Googling things like signs of a toxic boyfriend. I read through article after article, checklist after checklist, trying to see if maybe Derek was right. Maybe I was the problem and just could not see it. But nothing I read matched what I had done. Wanting your partner to contribute financially was not abuse. Asking about plans was not controlling. Being uncomfortable with another man constantly around was not insecurity. Yet the doubt remained nagging at the back of my mind. What if everyone else was wrong and they were right? My daily life became a struggle. I went to work but could barely function. My coworkers noticed something was off. They would ask if I was okay, and I would just say I was tired. I could not bring myself to explain what had happened because I was not even sure I understood it myself. I would come home to the empty apartment and microwave a frozen dinner instead of cooking the meals Jessica and I used to make together. I started sleeping on the couch because the bed held too many memories. Everything reminded me of her, of us, of what I thought we had. My buddy Marcus reached out during that first week. He had heard through mutual friends what happened. His response was immediate and supportive. "Dude, that is messed up. You literally paid for everything and she called you toxic." But even with Marcus telling me I was not crazy, the doubt still lingered. What if he was just being a good friend and not being honest with me? By the end of the first week, information started leaking through our mutual friend group. Marcus texted me saying he had seen Jessica's Instagram story. She had unblocked some of our mutual friends, but kept me blocked. The photos showed her and Derek at trendy brunch spots around Portland, expensive-looking plates of food and fancy coffee drinks. The captions were what really stung. "Finally, free to be myself. Surrounded by real love." The comment section was full of her friends praising her bravery for leaving. My stomach turned reading through them. Was this really how our relationship was being remembered, as something she needed to escape from another mutual friend? Emma reached out to me privately. She said she was sorry about what happened and then dropped a bomb I was not expecting. Jessica had moved in with Derek, not just staying with him temporarily, but actually moved into his studio apartment. I felt numb hearing that news. The timeline suddenly seemed incredibly suspicious. How quickly had this been planned? Were they already involved before she left? I started analyzing every interaction, every time Derek showed up at our apartment, every defensive reaction Jessica had when I expressed discomfort. The pieces were starting to form a picture I did not want to see. The public narrative being spread about our relationship was completely one-sided. Jessica had painted herself as the victim and me as the villain, with Derek as the hero who saved her. The story spread through our friend group like wildfire. Some friends sided with Jessica immediately, without ever asking for my side of the story. Others quietly reached out to tell me they knew that was not who I really was. But the damage was done. I had become the toxic ex-boyfriend in a story I did not even recognize as my own life. I could not stop questioning everything. Did Jessica want out of the relationship and just use Derek as an excuse? Were they already romantically involved and this was their way of justifying it? The more I thought about it, the more suspicious everything seemed. Derek's constant presence at our apartment. Jessica's immediate and complete trust in his judgment over mine, her partner of 3 years. How quickly she moved in with him. None of it felt coincidental anymore. There were practical matters to deal with too. Jessica's name was still on the lease as a co-signer. I could have her removed, but that would require her signature, and she was not responding to any form of communication. Some of her stuff was still in the apartment boxes, sitting in the corner that I could not bring myself to touch. They sat there like a shrine to our failed relationship, a constant reminder of what I had lost. Here is something I felt guilty about admitting even to myself. Once Jessica was gone and I was paying bills alone, I noticed something. My finances were actually more manageable. I realized I had been covering roughly 75% of our expenses. The groceries I bought lasted longer now. There were no random shopping bags appearing with expensive items she just had to have. No takeout orders that cost $60 or $70 showing up multiple times a week. I reduced our streaming services down to just the ones I actually used. The relief I felt about this made me feel terrible. Should not a breakup hurt more financially? Why did it feel like a weight had been lifted in that area? This created a strange contradiction in my emotions. I missed Jessica constantly. I missed her laugh, her presence, the future we had planned together. But I also noticed my stress levels dropping. I was not walking on eggshells anymore, not defending every basic request, not having Derek's judgment lurking over every conversation. The confusion of hurting emotionally while feeling lighter practically was difficult to process. By the end of the second week, I hit what I think was my lowest point. I drafted a text to Jessica that said, "Can we please talk?" I stared at it for 20 minutes before deleting it. What was the point? She had made her choice crystal clear. Derek had won whatever competition this had been, though I never knew we were competing. I decided I needed to start moving forward somehow. I deep cleaned the entire apartment, scrubbing away months of accumulated mess. I packed up Jessica's remaining things into boxes, not to be mean or spiteful, but because I needed to stop staring at them every single day. I labeled each box carefully with her name and stacked them neatly in the closet. It felt symbolic, like I was making space both literally and emotionally for whatever came next. Unexpected feelings started surfacing underneath all the hurt. Anger. Real, genuine anger. I kept replaying Derek's accusations in my mind. Financial abuse for asking a partner to contribute, controlling for basic communication about schedules, jealous for being uncomfortable with a sketchy situation. The more I thought about it, the more I realized those were not toxic behaviors. Those were boundaries. Normal, healthy boundaries that any functioning relationship should have. I made an appointment with a therapist, something I probably should have done years ago. In our first session, I laid out everything that had happened. The therapist listened carefully and then said something that started shifting my perspective. What you described sounds like reasonable expectations in a partnership. Toxic is a very serious word. Let's examine whether it actually applies here. We went through each of Derek's accusations, methodically analyzing them from an objective standpoint. The conclusion was clear. I was not perfect, no one is, but I was far from toxic. The real issue was that Jessica wanted zero accountability, and Derek enabled that desire completely. A new perspective started forming in my mind. Maybe this was not a loss. Maybe this was an escape. I still hurt. I still loved Jessica on some level, but I was starting to see the red flags with clarity I did not have before. Her entitlement masked as being a free spirit. Her irresponsibility masked as spontaneity. Derek's interference masked as supportive friendship. All of it was becoming clear in hindsight. I started taking small steps toward healing. I was sleeping better, no longer lying awake replaying conversations. I started meal prepping again, something I used to enjoy, but had stopped doing. When Marcus invited me to game night with some friends, I actually said yes instead of declining like I had been doing. These were tiny steps, but they felt significant. Then, at the end of week 2, my phone started buzzing with calls from an unknown number. I ignored it the first time, assuming it was spam. It called again, and again. After the 4th call, I finally answered, annoyed and ready to tell whatever telemarketer was calling to lose my number. But it was not a telemarketer. It was Derek, and his voice sounded nothing like the confident, smug tone he had used in my apartment 2 weeks earlier. Derek's voice came through the phone, shaky and desperate. "Stefan, it is Derek. Please do not hang up." I almost did hang up immediately. Every instinct told me to end the call and block the number, but something in his tone stopped me. He sounded exhausted, defeated, nothing like the hero rescuer who had helped carry Jessica's boxes out of my apartment. I stayed silent, waiting to hear what could possibly make him call me. Derek continued, "I need to talk to you about Jessica." I felt anger rising in my chest. I responded coldly, "I have nothing to say to you." His voice actually cracked as he said, "Please, man, please just listen." There was genuine desperation there. and my curiosity got the better of me. Derek took a shaky breath and said, "You were right. About everything." I asked him what he was talking about, though. Part of me already suspected where this was going. His response confirmed it. "Jessica. She is—" I did not know. I had no idea. I asked what he did not know, and his answer almost made me laugh. What she is really like. How you managed for 3 years. He started confessing everything. The first few days were fine. Great even. She was grateful. Sweet told me how I saved her from you. I felt like a hero. You know, I let out a bitter laugh at that. "Yeah, I bet you did." He ignored my jab and continued. But then things changed fast. Really fast. Derek explained that on day 4, Jessica stopped cleaning up after herself entirely. He came home to find dishes piled in the sink, trash overflowing, her stuff scattered everywhere. When he asked her nicely to help out, she told him she was processing trauma and needed space. He gave her that space, but things only got worse from there. Then came the financial drain. She started ordering food delivery every single day. Expensive sushi Thai food, fancy salads from upscale restaurants. Derek thought maybe she just needed comfort food while adjusting. But when the credit card bill came, she looked at him like he should obviously pay for all of it. His voice was incredulous as he told me, "Stefan, do you know how much she spent in 1 week? Over $800 on food delivery alone." But it did not stop there. Packages started arriving daily. New clothes, shoes, makeup, decorative items for his apartment that she decided needed updating. When he asked about it, she said she needed to rebuild her identity after the trauma of living with me. Derek admitted he did not want to seem controlling, a word that clearly had new meaning for him now, so he said nothing and just watched the charges pile up. Then came the demands on his time. Jessica expected Derek to drive her everywhere. Coffee dates with friends in Beaverton, which was a 30-minute drive. Yoga classes in Lake Oswego, another 25 minutes away. Shopping trips downtown during rush hour. Derek worked from home as a freelancer, trying to find steady employment, but he still had meetings and deadlines. When he could not drop everything to chauffeur her around, she got angry. She called him unsupportive and not a real friend. The irony of her using the same language they had used against me was not lost on either of us. Nothing was good enough for her. Derek's studio apartment was too small compared to my 2-bedroom place. The neighborhood was not trendy enough for her taste. His furniture was outdated and needed replacing. She wanted him to buy all new everything, and when he asked how he was supposed to afford that, while unemployed, she acted like he was being difficult. Then came what Derek called the social chaos. Last Friday, Jessica invited 8 people over to his studio apartment without telling him. He came out of his home office during a bathroom break to find his tiny space packed with strangers. They stayed until 2 in the morning. His neighbors complained about the noise, and he had to apologize to them the next day. When he asked Jessica to please give him a heads up before inviting people over, she called him controlling. Derek's voice dropped as he said she used the exact same words I used on you. I could hear the realization and regret in every syllable. But the story got worse, much worse. Derek told me that yesterday he came home from a job interview, one he desperately needed, and his key did not work. I asked him what he meant, and his response left me stunned. "She changed the locks, on my own apartment." I sat there in silence, trying to process that. Derek continued explaining that when he knocked on his own door, Jessica opened it, casually coffee in hand, and told him she felt unsafe with him, having unlimited access to the apartment, his apartment, that he paid for. Derek had to call his landlord to prove he actually lived there. It was humiliating. The landlord thought he was losing his mind. He had to get maintenance to come verify his identity and make a new key. The emergency locksmith cost him $150. When he confronted Jessica about it, she just shrugged and said he was overreacting. Like changing the locks on someone else's apartment was a completely reasonable thing to do. Then came the final straw, the thing that made Derek break down and call me. That morning, Jessica handed him a spreadsheet, an itemized bill for her living expenses for the 3 weeks she had been staying with him. I asked if he was kidding. He said he wished he was. Derek read through the bill, his voice shaking. Rent contribution $800 for a studio apartment that he already paid for in full. Food expenses $1,200. Personal items $600. Transportation services $400, which she called rideshare compensation for all the times he drove her places. And the best part, his voice dripping with disbelief, Emotional labor, compensation, $200. The total came to $3,200, and she expected him to Venmo her the money by Friday. This was not a joke. This was not her being petty. She genuinely expected payment. Derek's voice broke completely as he said, "Stefan, I am begging you. Please take her back." I could not help it. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I asked if he was serious right now. He said he knew he messed up, that he knew he ruined my relationship, but he could not do this anymore. She was impossible. He did not know how I lived with her for 3 years without losing my mind. Then came Derek's full realization and confession. Everything you did, everything I called toxic, it was just being an adult. Asking someone to help with bills is not financial abuse. It is partnership. Wanting to know plans is not controlling. It is coordination. Being uncomfortable with me constantly around was not jealousy. It was completely reasonable. His voice cracked again. I helped destroy a good relationship because I was too stupid to see the truth. I could hear genuine remorse, but it was too little and far too late. After a long silence, Derek asked desperately, "So, what am I supposed to do?" I took a deep breath and delivered the truth he needed to hear. "You wanted to be the hero, Derek. Congratulations. You saved Jessica from the toxic boyfriend. Now you get to experience what you actually saved her for." I explained the difference between support and enabling. Support means helping someone grow and take responsibility for themselves. Enabling means letting them avoid all consequences of their actions. He called me toxic for having boundaries, and now he was discovering exactly why those boundaries existed in the first place. Derek made one last desperate attempt. "So, you are just going to leave me with this?" My response was firm. "You made this bed." I spent 3 years loving someone who took everything and gave nothing. 3 years being called controlling for asking for basic respect. Now it is your turn. Maybe you will learn what I learned. Some people do not want a partner. They want a parent who will fund their lifestyle and ask for nothing in return. I told him to lose my number and added one final piece of advice. When Jessica eventually does this to you, and she will remember it, is not because you were not enough. It is because she will never think anyone is enough. I hung up, blocked his number, and took the first deep breath I had taken in 3 weeks. The weight that lifted off my shoulders in that moment was indescribable. 2 days after the phone call with Derek, Jessica unblocked me. A text came through that simply said, "Can we talk?" I looked at the message, turned on my read receipts so she would know I saw it, and did not respond. Another text came through an hour later. I made a mistake. Derek is not who I thought he was. I still said nothing. The third text revealed everything. He is not supporting me through this difficult time. The irony was almost funny. Now Derek was the toxic one in her narrative. I watched the texts escalate over the next few hours. They went from apologetic to angry in record time. "I cannot believe you are ignoring me, after everything we had. You are really going to throw away 3 years. That last one made me respond. I typed out, you threw it away, when you believed someone else over me, when you moved out instead of communicating, when you chose to see me as a villain instead of a partner." Then I blocked her again. Through mutual friends, I heard the rest of the story. Derek had to move back in with his parents because he could not afford his apartment anymore after all of Jessica's spending. Jessica legally stayed in his apartment for another week because the situation got complicated with the lease. The landlord finally threatened eviction proceedings if she did not leave. She eventually moved back to her parents' house, which was 2 hours away from Portland. Derek was still trying to recover both financially and emotionally from the experience. I felt no satisfaction in his suffering, but I felt no guilt either. He made his choices. I spent a lot of time reflecting on the red flags I had missed during our relationship. Jessica's entitlement had always been there, I just did not want to see it. Her favorite phrase was, "I deserve," never, "we deserve," or "us." It was always about her needs, her wants, her feelings. Gratitude was rare in our relationship, but complaints were constant and loud. She expected me to read her mind and then got angry when I inevitably could not. Her financial irresponsibility was masked as living in the moment and being spontaneous. Any criticism, no matter how gentle, was met with defensiveness and accusations. She surrounded herself with people who validated every feeling without ever challenging her to grow. All the signs were there. I just loved her too much to see them clearly. I also realized I had been enabling her behavior, By paying for everything without pushing back, I let her avoid responsibility. By not addressing issues more firmly, I let problems grow and fester. My love became an excuse for her bad behavior. She never had to grow or change because I made life too comfortable. That was my fault, and I owned it. I did a lot of research on what toxic actually means in relationships. Real toxicity involves manipulation, intentional gaslighting, deliberate harm to another person. What I did was set boundaries, ask for partnership, and express needs. The difference is crucial, and I needed to understand that for my own healing. The word toxic had been weaponized in our situation. It became a label to slap on anyone who asks for anything or expects accountability. It is easier to call someone toxic than to examine your own behavior and contributions to problems. I continued therapy, going to sessions every other week. We unpacked not just my relationship with Jessica, but patterns I had developed over the years. I learned about codependency, about the difference between healthy boundaries, and walls, about compromise versus self-abandonment. It was hard work, but necessary work. Good things started happening in other areas of my life. I got a promotion at work, my focus and dedication paid off, and I was offered a project lead position with a significant pay raise. For the first time, I could invest properly in my retirement without worrying about covering expenses for two people. The financial stability felt incredible. I started rediscovering parts of myself that had gotten lost in the relationship. I began hiking again, spending weekends exploring trails at Forest Park that I had not visited in years. I took up photography, documenting Oregon's natural beauty through my camera lens. I joined a recreational soccer league and made new friends who knew nothing about my past relationship drama. I read books I had been meaning to read for years, but never found time for. I cooked elaborate meals just for myself, enjoying the entire process from planning to eating. Life started feeling full again. My social life improved dramatically. I spent quality time with Marcus and my other friends who had stuck by me. They never judged, never said I told you, so they just supported me through everything. We had regular game nights, visited local breweries, and enjoyed each other's company. I realized how isolated I had become during my relationship with Jessica. She did not particularly like my friends, and slowly, without even noticing, I had started seeing them less and less. That was another red flag I missed. The lessons I learned from this experience were profound. Boundaries are not restrictions. They are expressions of self-respect and love. Real partnership requires two people actively rowing the boat together, not one person doing all the work while the other enjoys the ride. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and constantly giving without receiving is not noble. It is self-destruction. The word toxic is a serious accusation and should not be used as a catch-all for any discomfort or disagreement. Sometimes the hero narrative people create hides the real truth of a situation. Enabling someone is not kindness. It is actually a form of harm because it prevents growth. You cannot save someone from themselves, and trying will only drain you. Real love involves accountability, not just blind acceptance. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. I also gained a broader perspective on relationships in society. Men are often quick to be labeled toxic for having standards or expectations, but standards are not oppression. Asking for respect is not abuse. Wanting partnership is not control. Men deserve relationships where their contributions matter, where their boundaries are respected, where the word toxic is not weaponized every time they express a need or concern. 6 months after Jessica moved out, I found myself in a genuinely better place, mentally, physically, and financially. My apartment felt like home again, instead of a constant reminder of loss. I started dating casually, with no rush to jump into anything serious. Red flags were much easier to spot now. I had learned my lessons well. I would not settle for less than mutual respect, equal partnership, and healthy communication ever again. The unexpected peace I found was the greatest gift. I was no longer angry at Jessica or Derek. I felt pity for them maybe, but not anger. They were dealing with the consequences of their own choices and actions. I was free from that weight, from that drama, from that constant questioning of my own reality. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and being happy. I learned that it is better to be alone than in a relationship where you are constantly painted as the villain for having basic needs. It is better to be single than to constantly prove you are not toxic for wanting partnership. It is better to walk away than to shrink yourself down to nothing just to keep someone comfortable. Real love does not make you question your sanity or your worth. Real love does not require you to have zero boundaries to prove your devotion. If you are in a relationship where your needs are called toxic, where your boundaries are labeled as control, where asking for basic partnership is called abuse, please listen to what I am about to say. It is not you. The problem is not you. Walk away while you still can. You deserve someone who sees boundaries as respect, not restrictions. Someone who views partnership as teamwork, not oppression. Someone who appreciates your contributions instead of taking them for granted. Sometimes the most toxic thing you can do is stay in a situation that is slowly destroying your sense of self. I learned that the hard way, but at least I learned it before it was too late. Now I sit on my balcony in the early morning, with my coffee watching the sun rise over Portland. My phone buzzes with a notification from a dating app, someone new who seems interesting. I smile but do not rush to respond. I will get to it later, or maybe I will not. Right now I am just enjoying this moment of peace. Peace that I almost forgot could exist. Peace that I nearly gave up searching for. Peace that is worth more than any relationship built on enabling and avoiding accountability. I am finally truly completely free. And that freedom feels better than anything I ever had with Jessica. Have you ever been called toxic for setting boundaries in a relationship? Have you ever felt like the villain just for asking for basic respect? Drop your story in the comments below, because I know I am not alone in this experience. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about relationships, boundaries, and learning to value yourself. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that having standards does not make them toxic. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there realize they are not crazy for wanting a real partnership. Stay strong, know your worth, and never let anyone make you feel guilty for having boundaries. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember that sometimes walking away is the bravest and healthiest thing you can do.